WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We Should Know is on there. We're coming to you from Channel 16, Star Communications, WCLN Radio. There's a summation of this show that is printed each and every week in the Sampson Weekly newspaper. We hope you take an opportunity to at least look at, listen to, and maybe the discussions we have will help you in a better understanding of some of the things that's going on around you. One of those areas that is highly mobile and constantly, I guess, a focus for everybody, probably one of the most I'd say key important subjects that we talk about on here is education. And we have with us today Dr. Wesley Johnson, who is Superintendent of the Clinton City Schools. Dr. Johnson, thank you for being with us. I probably would get you to agree that education is probably one of the most important things that's happening right around us, right here, that we see every day.
Oh, I would definitely agree. You know, without education, we're all stuck in our old ruts, and it's important that we, work hard to get a good education so we can propel ourselves to the next goal that we have for our lives.
Well, I looked at, looking back at some of the records when you came on board, it seems like it's been, just 2 or 3 months ago, but now you've kind of walking in the path of being a year as superintendent here, but your background attributes you with assistant superintendent for the county schools here in Sampson County. If anybody knows the folks in this area, understands education and how that comes together with the people you do, we are in an interesting situation because you're just now into your second or third week, so to speak, as superintendent of Clinton City Schools in reopening for the new year. We just came through a hurricane called Dorian, and everybody was obviously seeing reflections of Florence, which flood devastated us. How does this affect the school system at the beginning of the year, and does it set some kind of mental picture for where you as a leader and the students are going? I guess my point would be, is there some kind of trauma that's going on that causes kids to go, wow, and they got to get back to the learning part?
That's a great question, Mr. J.W. I think that having a hurricane this early in the school year, we'd basically been in school for 8 days, 7 days. I think it definitely, to use a term, throws a monkey wrench into establishing routines, having a procedure. Those are things that you start at the beginning of the school year. You're working to establish those relationships with kids. You're working to establish classroom routines, school environments. And when you have a situation where now you've got to miss, you come to school after Labor Day, you're kind of ready now to, put roots down and get started with the curriculum. And now to start and have 2 days, and then you have a 2-day hurricane break followed by a weekend, it kind of puts a halt on those routines. And so almost when you get back now, you feel like you're kind of pressed up against the wall, being that we actually shortened the first semester this year so that we could test prior to getting out for the Christmas break. Because of things such as the calendar law, we can start school at specific instances of time. And so when you're pressed against the calendar law and things like those, you have to work around those parameters. So we actually started school early so that we could test, and we only had 80 days in the first semester. Well, now we've missed two of those days, so now we have 78. And so you feel like your back is pressed against the wall. You feel like you have a lot of curriculum to cover. And so we got to think about, are we going to take a day? We actually had a day for staff development in October. Are we going to take that day away now to put that day back into our calendar? And so those are some difficult discussions and situations that you have to determine at the board level, superintendent level, when you're trying to see how Dorian affects those. Another concern is, are we going to have additional hurricane days? We're just starting with the school year. We're just starting with the hurricane season. So what, if we have another storm later in September or 1st of October, how does that affect what we're trying to do? So there's a little apprehension to get school started back and to get back on the track, but also in the back of your mind, you're thinking, man, we just can't deal with another hurricane.
One of the things you're talking about, and I think part of this discussion as well, is when something like this happens and you have to inadvertently radically change the schedule, so to speak, it affects parents as well, because these parents are depending on the ability of their child to be at a certain location at a certain time for a period of time, because in today's world, both parents are working. So if they're not there, then somebody's got to step up and say, well, what do we do with the child now? You know, if school's out a half day that was unpredicted, or more importantly, a whole day, and yet they have to go to work, then what about that child?
Oh yeah, it definitely creates a difficult situation for parents. I mean, you know, we have to put the dependency back on them to find child care, especially for, you know, younger children. You know, I have two that are middle school and one that's in kindergarten now. So, you know, you'd have to find situations to, you know, if my wife and I were not educators, what would we have done with our kindergarten? You know, also, you know, we had just recently moved to the area, so our babysitter is back in, you know, barely in Sampson County, right there in Plainview. So it creates situations where you have to find childcare, and it's a very difficult situation for our parents. But you know, we're very appreciative of what they did and the work that they performed with us over those 2 days, because safety has to be our priority. So we have to make sure that, you know, our kids are safe, and also we have to work with our local government, our county officials, and when we have to, you know, establish shelters for our people to find and to seek shelter if they feel like they're in harm's way, then we have to work with them to close our schools to provide those sheltering opportunities for our community.
This idea of structure, this idea of learning environment, if you will, how important is it from an educator's point of view, and as you just mentioned, from a parent point of view, to make that transitional? So, for example, when a child gets home, that child has a structured environmental time for studies, homework, whatever words you want to use there, but for the continuation of the educational process. Is it important for parents to understand that it's not just in the school building, not just in the facilities that the superintendent oversees and is leader of, but it's also in that home environment that it almost needs to continue? Is that the right train of thought? Help us understand that.
Wow, that's a great thought, and I think it's one that we often misunderstand. You know, I think what I always say is that everybody, you want structure, but you don't really know that you need it. You need structure, but you don't necessarily want it. And so I think all children, all young adults, all adults, I think we need structure. I mean, I'm one that needs a routine. I think that we get lackadaisical when we're out of our routine, when we're out of, we can get into a rut. So if you work hard to establish structure, if you work hard to establish routine, so, you know, what is your routine? So is your routine to come home from school, maybe to get a snack, and then maybe to go directly into your homework time? I mean, you know, we work hard not to put too much homework onto our students, because we know that they have other things that they have to do. You know, a lot of our kids are involved in extracurricular activities, be it band or be it dance, you know, or and we want them to be involved in the community. But there's also points and things that we have to have them to get practice with. And so, like, you know, math is a skill that you have to practice. And so, you know, that's something that you have to give in homework. But instead of giving, let's say, 50 math problems, you may only give 5 or 10, because if you can practice those same skills. But I think going back to your original premise of having structure, I think it's very important to establish routines, you know, to establish routines where maybe the kid comes in, gets a snack, finds the time to do the homework, and then they might have dinner, and then, you know, they get ready for the next day. So I would say establishing routines are paramount to, you know, to good educational successes.
Does parents and guardians, and I say that because I realize in the broader community there's grandparents, there's other people, there's even foster care. Is there a need for someone to step up that has a leadership role that's outside the school within that family and say, here is the expectations that I have, and review those regularly? Is that part of that process?
Wow, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's important. You know, one of the things in my own family is I work really hard to set high expectations for my own children. I mean, you know, constantly I talk with them about if we're not careful, we'll revert back to a status quo. And it's not that the status quo is bad. The status quo just allows us to just be average. And really what we should be trying to do is to excel into what we've been called in to do. So I think it's important that we have high expectations. And like you said, we do have so many people in our community that are having to work long hours and having to work extra jobs just to make ends meet. And so if you're not able to provide that structure, going back to that, to that original question, that original premise, then you have to have someone else that can come in to provide that structure for that child. We don't want to just leave them to the wiles of the community to raise them. We have to have somebody to provide those high expectations so that they can find that routine, find that structure, so that can propel them to that next level, so that we can help them meet their goal.
So that brings the next question, which would be somewhat obvious, is the need for after-school care within the school system itself. When that school exits at 3 or whatever time it does, there's anywhere from a 2 to 3 hour period of time that if that child does not have somewhere to go, is and does the school allow for some after-school care, and should it?
Oh, that's great. And I would say, to answer that specific question, absolutely. I think we've got to establish some type of programs. I know that a program that Clinton City used to have in the past was Blazing Stars. And Blazing Stars was an after-school program that provided a place for students to go to learn. It was a sheltered environment where they would go, they would learn, and they would also get some time for free play, because that's also important as well. Currently, we don't have that, but we're looking at grant opportunities. It was a grant-funded program, and we're looking at some funds, possibly some ways that we can get back to offering a program like that, because I think it's so important, especially at that early elementary level, because the time we get into middle school and high school, we do offer a lot of extracurriculars that we've already talked about, but right now at the K-5 level, there's not a lot of extras that we can offer other than an after-school program like you mentioned.
Well, we're going to take our first break, and we're going to come back. I want to talk about a little bit more in depth some of the things that you're now doing, and try to get into a little bit of the vision of leadership you have and where you're going to take Clinton City Schools. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Dr. Wesley Johnson, the Superintendent of Clinton City Schools right here in Sampson County. We're going to talk about some rural issues and some challenges facing us in the future. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home, so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. We're coming to you from WCLN Radio, Star Communications, Channel 16. Sampson Weekly newspaper, a printed summation of the show. We're talking about something today I think that everybody would probably agree at some point in time has either affected your life, will affect your child, grandchildren, or even community. It has to do with the structure and fabric of who we are, and that's education. And public school education is high on the list for our guest today, Dr. Wesley Johnson, Clinton City School Superintendent, Bachelor of Science from Campbell University, Master of Education, School Administration, and Doctorate of Education from East Carolina University. So go Pirates, and
yes, sir.
we'll fly that flag as long as our state fans and Carolina and Duke fans don't take us out.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about this idea of education not being a singular kind of structure. You're obviously, to some degree, one would say the gold standard's our superintendent. Just look at our superintendent. We want you to drive toward that, because that's the beacon light of what education is. When we look at the expectation of our school board, and I want to be one of the first, and I don't know how many said, but thank them for their service.
Absolutely.
People that step up today and take on a role, whether it's a school board, commissioner, or whatever, that's a huge, huge thing to do, because all of a sudden you become I guess, the pin dart for whatever comes up. You get hit. So let's put all that in perspective for folks and say there's certain things you can do. Certain things the school system can't do. There's funding and challenges, and I'm tossing this on the table as kind of a cadre of possibilities to choose from here. But you're also with the challenge now of charter schools. So, you know, we're at the precipice of what, about 200 charter schools in the state, which a few years ago would have been unheard of. There's some encouragement for more charter schools. Help us wrap our heads around where we're headed here. What's best for my child? What's best for my children? How much do I have to pay to get them there? And I've heard and got friends with kids in both places. So it's kind of hard to say, well, yeah, we think public schools can measure up when the standards is a little bit different, or maybe the rules and regulations are different. Help us understand that.
Wow, that's a very complex and
absolutely just throw you in a big pond here.
Yeah, and deep question, Mr. JW. But you know, the situation with charter schools is, you know, at one time there was a cap. There was a cap on the charter schools of 100, and now we've kind of doubled that. And as you noted, there's the possibility that charter schools can continue to open and continue to flourish. If you ask me, I think if I am in direct opposition to charter schools, I would say no. You know, but I do think that the public education provides a snapshot into our local communities. Public schools are still vital because they serve our local communities. They serve the direct population that we're going to deal with on a daily basis. And so it's a unique perspective because, you know, are there public schools that are failing? Absolutely. But just in a related sense, and probably even more, there are a number of charter schools that are failing. And as you noted, they do have some different parameters. They do have some different rules that they play by. But in general, public education is a great environment for you know, everyone. My children are being educated in a public setting. I mean, they have always been. We have 2 middle school daughters. We have a kindergartner, and they have always been a product of public education. My wife is a teacher in the public education field. I mean, we've devoted combined over 40 years to public education, and you have lots of dedicated individuals who have spent a lot of time devoting themselves to public education. And so I like to think that public education is the best of all the worlds, because I think it prepares our kids best for the local communities that they're going to grow up in. The demographic groups are very similar that they're going to see in the community, and so I'm one that likes to be an advocate for public education.
So when we look at public education and the expectation of public education, where does that start? Where does when a person is, okay, they've got a child and their child starting in kindergarten, and they start thinking about, well, now I remember when I was in school. I remember maybe they're not from around here. Maybe they were, you know, from some suburb of a larger city or something, so they don't have a relationship or a relative thinking base for where we are. The expectation for that, is that something that's set by the board? Is it set by the superintendent administration? Or is it set by that other Johnson guy that's the superintendent on the state level? Where do we get the roadmap for, quote, our expectation for education? And I think a lot of folks are kind of getting a little bit of dilemma with that, because I think the reality in just listening to folks, and to me is listening with a bit of concentration, the expectation is outweighing the capacity and capability of the system.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would, to directly answer that, I would think that everybody has a little bit of play into the expectations that are set, but primarily I think at the local level, curriculum is set more by the state level. But what is set by the local level is the word that you used, is expectations. What are the expectations going to be in Clinton City Schools? And I think that those are primarily a direct correlation between the board and the superintendent. And they work collaboratively, and thankfully I have a great relationship with my board, that we work to set high expectations. But then after you set those high expectations, after you set those, I was looking here at my core values and pulling those up, after we set the core values, after we set our vision and mission, then it becomes the responsibility of the building level administration and the teachers and our guidance counselors and our staff to make sure that they work to maintain those expectations and to have their own expectations. And when you think, we talked earlier about early elementary, and a lot of early elementary, expectations are set by that classroom teacher. And so we all know, the research proves that the direct correlation between a positive experience in school and the results of positive education is the teacher. The teacher has the number one most influential role on the education that's received. And so we have to make sure at the local level that we work diligently to have high expectations for our teachers, but also that we work hard to find the best teachers for the environment. And having teachers that have been a part of the system, or having teachers that are local to our community, who have an understanding of what our community is and what our community is looking for, plays a very important role in ensuring our success here in Clinton City Schools.
Teacher being the critical part of the commentary that you just made, if we miss that child actually assimilating their mindset from the K-5 in that period of time, if that teacher misses that child does not develop a kind of a foundation and understanding, is there potential that we lose that child?
Yeah, I would definitely say that there's an opportunity to lose any child. And so one of the things that has assisted us with this is, going back to the state level, is that they've put some caps on class size. Mm-hmm. So class size now is capped low, across the board. It's been lowered, which is a good thing, because at the early elementary level, you need to have lower class sizes. I mean, I think we need to have lower class sizes at every level, but it's really important that early elementary, because when you think about the environment that's being established, like you said, it's very important that we form relationships with all kids, but especially at that early level, so that they feel a direct connection to that teacher, so that we can meet their, because we know, I mean, we can think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. If we don't meet their physiological needs, I mean, then we're not going to be able to educate them. So it's important that we provide a loving environment, establish this good relationship with students, so that we can meet their educational needs as well.
And I think you're exactly right on point with where I was going with that. And if you look at Abraham Maslow and you look at the fact of just basic fear and then hunger, filling those needs at the fundamental level, and I think about that when that child starts at kindergarten. I guess, and I'll say this in just kind of a question as well as a discussion point as well, is that oftentimes that child is a window into the home, and the teacher has the eye to be able to see right into the home, because that child reflects that. Is that a rational statement, what I just said? I mean, can a child come into a class and sit down and that teacher get to know that child, and during that period of time of development, the child tends to reflect what they hear at home, and people need to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that in a sense. I mean, because we're all unique. I mean, and when you have multiple children, you understand that. I mean, I have 3 children with 3 very different personalities.
Sure.
But we also have to think about their prior experiences.
Yeah.
And so all 3 of my children had very unique and different prior experiences. So in fact, that when my last child, who's now in kindergarten, started school, I mean, she had been in a 2-day-a-week preschool class, a 3-day-a-week preschool class, a 4-day-a-week preschool class. So she was very prepared for school. Whereas we have other students that are not. Like my oldest girl, she was in a home daycare for 5 years. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that when she got to school, she was not as prepared as my youngest child. Mm-hmm. And so that's why early education, like pre-K programs, mm-hmm. and More at 4 and NC Pre-K, that's why those types of programs are vital to providing this early education for our students, so that they start kindergarten more prepared and ready to learn than other students that aren't provided those same opportunities.
And that continuation of understanding the structure and expectation of not only the parents, but how that transitions into the school system is critically important. How strong are PTOs, and how important are PTOs now, parent-teacher organizations, or whatever other name they've now accumulated? I don't know what. How critical are they?
Well, they're very critical. I mean, you have to have parent involvement. You have to have your parents respecting your schools. You have to have your parents respecting your teachers, because they establish, you know, especially at that early level, they establish the rapport with the school that that student's going to bring. And so we want them to have a very positive environment, and we want them to have, one of the things we talk about, and we've been talking about it in Clinton City Schools, is customer service. And we want to provide a good customer service atmosphere that when we have visitors into our school, that they feel welcomed. So we want our parents to feel welcomed. We want them to have this good environment that we establish, you know, in our school system.
We're going to take another break, and we'll come back and talk about attendance a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Dr. Wesley Johnson. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment. We Should Know is on the air.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody try to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. I want to remind you to continue to send us your emails or commentary in regards to the shows we've had, suggestions about upcoming shows to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. We certainly appreciate that and want to thank you for your commentary from our show a couple of weeks ago, in fact, with the National Weather Service and doing kind of predictions and understanding of how weather patterns work. Unfortunately, we got to see how some of those work just here in the past few days with something called Dorian. So, Dr. Johnson is, I guess, an idea behind the reality, and one of the things that I think you're trying to do, or at least it was published recently in local media, is to kind of focus in on this attendance issue. It's one of those things, if you're not there, you can't get anywhere, right, because you got to have a starting point. And the idea of getting to the school now has become a questionable item, simply because we have schools now that are online.
Right.
But the reality is, especially in those fundamental, what I call the development years at K-5, or you could even say K through 7 or 8, or what band you want to put on, that's the development where you understand how to work with structured learning. Mm-hmm. So help us understand the importance of attendance and some of the points you've made recently, and not only you and the board and others, to try to get folks to be on time and be in school. Right.
Well, attendance is vital. I mean, it's crucial. I mean, without good attendance, I mean, you can't, as you know, to get the education that you need, you're missing out. And oftentimes, education is like rungs on a ladder. Mm-hmm. That's why each grade level is important. That's why each day is important. It builds off of one another. There's not a lot of opportunity in education where we're reviewing previous material. I mean, maybe in the past, but now with, you know, different state standards, I mean, there's lots of material that we have to cover. So when you miss instruction. And I think that's one thing that our parents and our students need to hear. We call it chronic absenteeism issue. I mean, we have people that miss more than 10% of the school day, more than 10% of the school year. And so when you look at those type of things, and those are pretty high numbers actually, Mr. JW, when you look at people that miss more than 10 days, and are there valid excuses for missing? Sure. I mean, you can be sick. I mean, we don't want you to send your child to school if they're sick. Mm-hmm. But you know, if there's an issue where that you feel like you could get them there, I mean, and they feel like they could stay, go ahead and send them. I mean, we have school nurses. If we mm-hmm. need to get back in touch with you to get them some assistance, get them some help, we will. But attendance is important. Without proper attendance, you're not going to get a good education. But like you said earlier also, and as we talked about, it creates a pattern. Mm-hmm. It creates a routine. And so if you're creating a pattern where you feel like chronic absenteeism is okay, that's going to go with you throughout life. You're going to feel like chronic absenteeism is okay when you have a career, when you get a job. And so we think that this early foundation in education and getting to school every day helps somebody to be a better career person, to be a better employee, so that when they have established themselves and having a routine and getting up every day and coming to school, that they're going to be that way when they have a career and as they get older and as they have a good job.
You know, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, and of course looking at my notes and listening to what you're saying, it's a very, very tender area when you start looking at a child and you say, okay, we want you to be at school on time. We want you to learn certain things. We want you to react in a certain way in this structured environment. And the very tender areas is when you look at parents and say, well, for them to do that, you need to check this block, and this block. Because parents are pretty much inundated in trying to maintain a home. Again, both parents working. Some parents may be working 2 or 3 jobs. So if you push on that angle too much, you have a potential of breaking the box, so to speak. At the same time, everybody needs to, I think, have an awareness that that child's expectation is better built through the family to the school than the school trying to build their structure of expectation and send them back to the family. And I think oftentimes that's what seems to be happening. We'll get the child to school, they'll get them straightened out and teach them how to learn and teach them all these things, and we'll just get them back to school the next morning. Because quite frankly, parents are exhausted just trying to survive. So I see both sides of it. I guess what I'm saying is, but is it not a conversation we've got to have where you got to look at parents at some point in time and say, you know, we're not telling you what to do, but here's some things that would help us when that child comes through the door in the morning.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I'm digging right into the heart of the matter here.
No, Mr. JW, I think you've hit on it. I mean, you know, as a school and as parents, I mean, we share a partnership. We share a responsibility to raise this child and to rear this child to be the best that they can be, whatever that may be, whatever their ceiling is. We're going to have to establish that routine for them. We're going to have to establish that partnership. Do we do the best job we can at establishing that partnership? Not always, but we have to understand that it is a partnership. You know, I think about some of the first education courses I had, and we learned things about like words like in Latin of loco parentis. You know, what does that mean? Well, it means that when that child is in my environment, I act as the parent. And I don't know that I understood that, actually, Mr. JW, until I became a parent of my own. And now that I have 3 children and I think about their routines and their extracurricular activities and the time that's spent, that's a critical time that is spent at school every day. I mean, you're really spending more time with my kindergartner, you know, from 7:45 to 2:45 than really my wife or I when we get them home in the afternoon. And so you do have to have that partnership. We do have to have that loco parentis, that we're working together. And so we do have to have, going back to your previous question, we do have to have that involvement with PTSA and all of those too. And we have to get to know not only the child, we have to get to know you as the parent and your expectations as well, so that we can help that student to assimilate to where you see them, you know, to where you see their ultimate goal is in life. And so, especially going, like you said, to that early education, it's very important that we develop that routine, because they may not can tell us you know, where they see themselves. When we get to high school, when I was a high school administrator, you can have those conversations with students very easy. But that early elementary level, you really have to rely on the parent and the teacher to be providing that unique plan for that student, for each student that you're dealing with, that kind of personalized education.
And there are those that would say, and some studies would lean in this direction, that if we don't get this right, then this explains why we have this largest in the entire world population of people behind bars. Well over 20% of our citizens are incarcerated. And so there are indicators out there that people would say to you and me, well, here's your plan. And if you don't get it right up here, here's the alternative. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the case every time, because obviously we have some people with all kinds of degrees behind bars, but for the majority of looking at it statistically, it does seem to reflect that there's some issues with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, and one of the things that we've had to take on in public education is we've had to teach things like character ed. I mean, when I was going to school, we didn't teach character ed.
No.
But character ed is important because of things you just mentioned. Getting back to something that I said in the last answer was this personalized approach. You know, again, back when I was teaching. Back when I was in school, we catered to the middle. We taught to the middle. There wasn't this personalized approach. And so now we have to have a personalized approach to do exactly what you just said so that we don't lose students, not only to incarceration, but to lose kids to dropouts. And we don't want any kid to drop out, because we know that a dropout is not going to be able to produce at the level that they would have been if they would have stayed in school. And so ultimately, we're about bettering our community as a public education environment. So we better our community by putting out strong graduates who can go to not only get degrees, but can find good jobs and get good paying jobs in the area so they can give back to our community. So what I think about when I think about education, one of the things that we try to push hard in Clinton City School is a personalized approach where we're forming a relationship and forging a relationship with every child so that we don't lose any. Thinking about the No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
The No Child Left Behind, was it a perfect law? No, but its premise was perfect. We don't want to leave any child behind. We want to work with each individual child to find their, I like to say, find their carrot. We want to find their carrot. We're going to find what motivates that child so that we can push them and pull them along sometimes to get them to where we ultimately want them to get to, and this is become a graduate.
And that then reflects, of course, the conversation would lead one then to go and say, well, are our alternative schools working? Are they effective? Is there another plan? What do we do with that child that we can't seem to reach? And a lot of folks may look at it and go, well, we really should do away with alternative schools. But then you have a gap. You can't, as an administrator, you've got structure. At the same time, you can't allow one or two people to destroy the structure for 30 or 40 others. So how do you deal with that?
That's a good question too. And so one of the things that we kind of have a unique perspective on our alternative program, and we've actually changed that location this year in Clinton City Schools, and we moved it to the College Street, to our old auditorium, multi-purpose room there. But at that environment, we provide a lot of one-on-one supports. So again, we know that going back to this personalized education plan, we know that not all students learn best in an environment of 25 to 30 kids. There are some students that actually learn better in a one-on-one environment. And so also at this environment, we've had supports like behavioral supports. We have behavioral interventionists, individuals that work with these students on a one-on-one basis. We have teacher assistants. We have we're involving local pastors. And so they can have these one-on-one discussions with these students because they need some additional guidance. And I think that when we think about alternative school, we think about programs that provide additional guidance to help our students get back in line so they can get back into the regular school and get back learning from our teachers.
We're going to take another break, and we'll be back in a moment and follow up on some of this nurturing education. What are we talking? Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're having what I think is a very interesting discussion about education. We hope you're picking up something here. Stay tuned. We'll be back in one moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're on the last segment coming up. Hope you've been with us today. If you happen to just be tuning in on your TV, Channel 16, Star Communications, cable, or if you happen to be just tuning in on WCLN radio, or if maybe you're looking at this in a newspaper. Either way, the last segment of the show, we got a lot of very important things we want to talk about. We're talking with the superintendent of Clinton City Schools, Dr. Wesley Johnson. Dr. Johnson, your background is tremendous in the sense of classroom, in the sense of Sampson County schools. Worked your way right on up to assistant superintendent, and then just decided about a year ago to step over and put your foot into Clinton City Schools as, quote, the superintendent. A lot of things you have learned in your journey thus far. I suspect there's a lot of things you will learn in your journey going forward. In this last segment, there's a couple of areas I want to touch on, and the first thing I want to do is follow up, if we can, very quickly on this idea of the student. the individual student, and the reality of the environment that school brings. Now, no matter what, there's certain things that we can't control outside the school, but when that child comes into that school, the two words that comes to mind is obviously it's an educational environment. This is a school. There's classrooms, there's structure, there's desks, there's all these kinds of things. But then, as part of that environment, is there an expectation now, maybe different than what it used to be, as it relates to the word nurturing?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that's a deep question, too. And I would have to agree that, yes, that I think that there is a nurturing component that has to be provided by our schools. Again, school is different. I mean, education is different. I mean, this is my 22nd year in education, and it's changed. I mean, even in the local community, as you noted from my background, I've been in Sampson County for 21 years, starting my 22nd year. But school's changed, and trying to answer why it's changed is a very difficult question that we need to be talking about, because we need to figure out if there's more we can do to promote education and to better our community, and I think it starts with that partnership that we talked about earlier, with the home environment. But yes, so I think we need to be providing character education. We need to be providing relationship building with our students, because, as I said earlier, there's always a motivational factor. And, I've had conversations with kids about things that I didn't necessarily like or enjoy, like maybe I would have to go out and research some, Fortnite or something. I mean, I don't play it, but, I would research it to have just a little bit of knowledge that I could speak to. If you were the student, I could speak to JW, and we could strike up this conversation about Fortnite to hopefully, if you weren't if you didn't care about history or you didn't care about math or science, I could pull you in with this conversation about Fortnite and
create a connection.
Create that connection, and I think that that's an important role that our teachers now have to do that maybe they didn't have to do 20 years ago because we just went to school to learn. But creating that connection is vital, I think, now.
And the part of that I hear a lot of parents talk about, and I know you've heard this as well, and you are a parent, but you talked about math earlier. Over the past few years, I've heard many parents make this statement. Well, quite frankly, I don't know how to help my child with this, quote, new math. Well, math is math. It's just a design, the way the formulas is set forward and that kind of thing. But the reality is there's alternatives. The schools can step up and say, well, look, we can offer some outside assistance, or maybe recommend somebody to tutor that child. Is that important for them to know as well?
Oh yeah, I agree. No, and I've heard that too, Mr. J.
Everywhere.
Is that math is taught differently, and we also have different expectations on students at a lower level than we've always had. Now, the state did address that a little bit, and they did move some of those standards back up. There had been kind of this moving standards down and pushing it further and further down. And I think that the state realized that that's not necessarily the best way to do things. And in fact, we have a new math test that came in last year for the EOG and the EOC. And always that has been, when you had a new math test, that your proficiency levels went way down.
Well, and that's the end of grade and end of course.
Yes, sir. End of grade, end of course test. But ours stayed about the same, and it was actually across the board that they stayed about the same, because now the standards are different, the test. But getting back to that the direct question, I think it's important that we provide assistance to our parents. That if they need some assistance with providing after school assistance, after school help, even like professional development, where we can give them opportunities to learn what the curriculum looks like. And of course, there's the website, NCDPI. They have a website that you can go to find the standards, but that doesn't necessarily give you the examples. And so one of the things that we like to do in Clinton City, and really in all school systems, is they provide a lot of digital resources. And so you can provide examples of these problems through these digital resources. And a lot of times those resources are available not just in the school, but also at home. And so they can get on their smart devices or on their laptops, and they can work with their parents on these problems, and the parents can go over them with them. But it is difficult when the math has changed so drastically.
And there's a lot of things I want to try to get into this segment, so I'm going to go ahead and warn you I'm fixing to take a sharp right. Hold on. With that said, and everything we've talked about, this sharp right question is, do we have adequate counselors in schools to deal with behavioral issues and psychological issues that could potentially lead to disastrous impacts?
Wow, the word adequate there is probably that's
a rubber band. I get it. I get it.
Do we need more, and could we use more? Absolutely. One of the things that we're trying to do in Clinton City Schools is to establish, as you talked about earlier, as our alternative program. We're actually starting to look at our alternative program a little bit differently, as I said earlier, and having opportunities for our kids to go there for support, not necessarily to be assigned to the alternative program, but to have support there. And we're working with a local psychologist from outside of Wilmington to provide additional supports to our counselors. Really we're trying to educate our counselors on how to deal with these problems and these situations that we're seeing more of in our schools, and so providing them education to be able to know how to talk with students like that, because I don't know that was the prevailing education that they received when they got their degrees, but trying to provide them that education now, trying to provide those supports, having things in the system like behavioral interventionist, working with that psychologist is definitely helping. But yeah, I think we could definitely have more counselors.
Yeah, and I think the reason that I posted that is a point that I wanted to make with you is that what we're seeing as a result of some very devastating things is these character behaviors were being acted out months, years before that. And so then when that happens, we go back from a media perspective or whatever, and we start doing the research and we go, well, this has been going on now for 5 years and everybody missed it. And so at some point in time, that becomes part of accountability as well.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. Accountability is not just what you do on a test. And I've always said that you don't just judge my schools on what our accountability results say. Look at the whole school holistically and how we're preparing our graduates, how we're preparing our students and their psychological needs, how we're meeting their safety needs. And that's what we should be held accountable to. It's not just what the state looks as a performance composite and says, oh, you're a C school because you did so, so, and so, and so. There has to be additional accountability measures as well.
Changing again, I'm taking a hard left now, so to speak, but changing this, and we've got a few minutes left, and I want to try to get this in. Recently, the News and Observer did a forum, and they basically articulated that there is a divide. There is two North Carolinas. There's a rural North Carolina, there's an urban North Carolina. Citing a comment from Rebecca Tippett, the founding director of North Carolina Population Center at UNC Chapel Hill, one of the things that she mentioned, which I thought was interesting, 10 most populous states, North Carolina has the largest population of individuals living in rural areas. Its rural population is larger than any other state, with the exception of Texas. We got a lot of folks living in rural areas in North Carolina. This whole idea of there being a tipping point ties that all of these counties that are in rural counties seem to be losing population. Job growth is in decline. There's a lot of struggling going on. Sampson County is not exactly on the lower tier, but it's in that area as well. There's a lot of need to do something in that area. How does that affect your job, and how does that affect the education process?
Wow. Another deep, complex question. But yeah, you're exactly right. Currently North Carolina, I believe, is the 9th largest state, and we have as you noted, the 2nd largest rural population behind Texas. And so we live in a rural area. And so one of the things that we try to do is promote our area. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is we're forging a partnership with Sampson Community College and Sampson County Schools to develop a career center. We want to have this career center because we want to provide educational opportunities for a group of students that we may miss, that we're going to try to get them good jobs that they can see our local community as a good place to establish a family, to establish roots. Because I think we all know that Sampson County is a great place to live and a great place to work. And so we're really working hard to help them to see that it's not just the urban areas, not just Wilmington and Greensboro and Durham and Raleigh and Chapel Hill and Charlotte, but that Sampson County is a great place, and that we want the students to go off and get these opportunities to get these great degrees in universities, but also to have some local opportunities for them to stay right here in our community. And even if they do go off and do get these great degrees, that they come back and work in the local community.
This discussion is something that Wesley, I'd like to have maybe as a semester program or something. I'd love to just do these programs regularly on education, because, you know, I personally feel, and I think a lot of our listeners understand, that the foundation of who we are, what we will become as a society, rests with our understanding and wisdom building skills. So as I look at that, and with closure, I would just ask, do you have anything you want to say to the teachers, parents, or others? You got about 15 seconds.
I just thank them for their, just welcoming me. You know, again, as you noted, I'm a product of this environment, been here for 22 years, and the last year has been great. We're going to continue to work hard to push Clinton City Schools and keep moving on up.
Thank you for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being with us. Also, remember, each and every week on Tuesday, we also look forward to seeing you again next week right here on We Should Know, and may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.